IKEA is a great cheap alternative, and it's inexpensive, but it doesn't look cheap. That's the thing to remember. Keep in mind, you can change anything with IKEA in some of these houses. You can rip out the kitchen and you can put in a brand new IKEA kitchen, and it won't cost you too much money. But the other thing too is, as a society, I think that everybody's gotten so used to getting everything they want right now. And when a lot of people, myself included, when I purchased my home, it wasn't the most perfect house. I picked a couple of projects that I wanted to start and renew and do about my house. And then every year I would start to pick a different project. So now, of course, because I've been in my home for over 7 years, now everything looks great, but it's only because year after year after year, I selected a project that made sense for me to do in the house to improve upon it. So it's good to kind of just have that reality check of, you don't need to have everything that you want absolutely right now. Start small, pick that one project to finish, and then each year save up and do another project in the home. Other things for first-time home buyers: when you're buying, don't buy in spring. That's probably the most expensive time period to buy in the Toronto real estate market. It's crazy out there. Houses are selling for $200,000 and $300,000 over the asking price. Summer, we'll see what happens this summer. But in the summer market, things do quiet down a little bit, partly because some of the buyers have gotten sick and tired of losing out on bidding wars in the springtime. So they decide that they're going to take a rest. Well, let me tell you, as a smart first-time home buyer, do not rest during the summertime. In the summertime, that's when you're still going to be out hard trying to buy a house, because that way the competition will just be a little bit less. People are away at cottages, clients are away at cottages, real estate agents are away at cottages. So it's really going to bring your competition down a little bit more, which is great, especially in this market being so competitive. The other great time to consider purchasing is December. December, again, when people's attention turns to the holidays, whether it's Christmas or Hanukkah or any other thing that they're celebrating, they just tend to start going into party mode and holiday celebration mode and not looking so hard at the housing market. So I would suggest considering looking at late November, early December as a great time for a first-time home buyer to get in the market. You really also have to keep in mind, you really need to sort of like what comes out in the market right now, because yes, I'm saying that it's a good time to buy, but there also is not a lot of inventory during those times of years. So when something comes up on the market, you need to love it. You need to make it good in your mind so that you will actually put an offer on a house in those times and actually get the house. Make sure that when you buy a place, you can also look to see what's an upcoming neighborhood. As I mentioned, the area between St. Clair and Eglinton, around Rogers Road, is certainly becoming a lot more populated these days. You could look at areas like Danforth and Main as well as upcoming areas. They're close to transit. At Danforth and Main, there's a GO train station there. Plus, you are on the TTC subway line, which is huge. Also look for areas where there's nice coffee shops and restaurants. There's a street I was out with a client recently. I think it was in the Dufferin and DuPont area recently. There's a street called Westmoreland, and you can see all sort of cute little shops opening, and there was a rum distillery place that was offering rum tastings. But cute things like that you could see are really going to start making that market really interesting and making homes in those areas a little bit more expensive, but right now they're cheap. The other thing is that Peter Freed has recently taken over the Dufferin Mall in that area, so that you know that he's going to build that mall up to be something quite spectacular. So it's a great neighborhood to make sure that you buy a home around, because the value of that real estate will go up, up, up. Now, again, as I mentioned, you really shouldn't skip the home inspection. It's something that you should always do. When you hire a home inspector, they tend to look at the major systems of the house. So they tend to look at the heating and the cooling systems and the roof and making sure that there isn't a lot of moisture in the basement. But those are things that the regular layperson cannot notice. So it's really good to have a home inspector take a look at those items. As well, in some cases, in some neighborhoods, mainly in the east end of the city, it's important to get a termite inspection done as well too. That's also a very good idea. And when it comes to buying your real estate, you want to always make sure you get a lawyer involved. Getting a lawyer is super important when it comes to real estate because they're going to check the status of the property. They're going to, if it's a condo, they're going to get a status certificate. And the status certificate is going to basically let your lawyer see what are the financials of that building. How is that building doing financially? Do they have enough money saved in their reserve fund? Are the maintenance fees going to go up in the future? Is there going to be a special assessment coming down where owners are expected to kick in an extra amount of money to fix something wrong in the building? So it's really important to make sure that you have your lawyer take a look at that. And anytime you put in an offer on a condo, make sure that it is conditional on the status certificate. Or make sure you see that status certificate before you put in an offer. But usually it's something that's available once you put in an offer. You'll be able to get a copy of the status certificate, and your lawyer will have a few days to take a look at the status certificate to make sure that everything's okay. On the housing front, the lawyer needs to make sure that they can search for title. So they're going to search for good, clean title, which basically means making sure that that person who's selling the house truly does own it, and own it free and clear. There aren't any liens from Revenue Canada or construction liens or anything else on the property. So your real estate lawyer is really going to be looking out for you for that. And a real estate lawyer these days can cost anywhere between $1,000 to $2,000. I've really seen prices running the gamut in terms of what a real estate lawyer will charge you. But they're a very huge asset to have, and it's very important to make sure that you use a lawyer that specializes in real estate. Don't just use an aunt or an uncle or a cousin or somebody that is a regular lawyer, but make sure you use someone who's specifically working with real estate law. That's very, very important. And if you're purchasing a pre-construction condo, that's a whole other kettle of fish. But again, it's a very, very, very important to get a real estate lawyer if you are purchasing a pre-construction condo, because the developer will tack on a number of development charges, and your lawyer will be able to assess them and basically go through and cross them out of your deal to make sure that you don't have any additional closing costs. So that's really important. One of the closing costs that you should notice as a first-time home buyer is that there is a land transfer tax. And in Toronto, unfortunately, we have to pay a double land transfer tax. Never fun, of course, but there is a rebate for first-time home buyers. So that is a great savings for first-time home buyers. And the rebate is over $5,000 for the land transfer tax if you are a first-time home buyer. Now, you will only qualify to be a first-time home buyer if you've never, ever, ever bought property anywhere in the world. So it can't just be Canada, it must be anywhere in the world. You have never purchased property anywhere in the world, and that is how you will qualify for the first-time home buyer rebate for the land transfer tax. So all those things are very important. When it comes to, as I mentioned earlier, I was talking about basement apartments. The basement apartments in the city of Toronto are not always legal. So you need to decide for yourself if you can stomach owning a property that's not necessarily legal. Generally what I would do is I would call in a fire consultant. I'm really concerned about, I want to make sure whatever I'm building is safe for somebody who's living there. So I would bring in a fire consultant and make sure that you've got fire rated doors and you've got all the necessary things to make sure that you're not building a fire trap. At the end of the day, if someone's going to be living in your basement, you want to make sure that you can sleep at night, that you know that you have built a safe place for somebody to live. You don't want anything horrible to happen to them. When it comes to getting money, I definitely recommend talk to a mortgage broker. As a first-time home buyer, they can give you a pre-approval, and that's just when they go do the pre-approval, they're going to take a look at your income, they're going to take a look at your credit rating, and make sure that you are in a good position to put in an offer on a home. And in the marketplace that we're in right now, you generally cannot put in a finance condition. So meeting with a mortgage broker is very, very important to make sure that you don't need to put in a finance condition in the house. So make sure that you do that. It's super, super important. And when you do have a pre-approval, you can make sure that you're very confident that you can buy what you're buying. There's nothing worse than thinking that you're approved to spend $700,000 and you go out and look for houses for $700,000. And when it comes to offer night, you're putting in an offer and then you realize all of a sudden the next day that, whoa, wait a minute, you're only qualified to shop for $500,000 houses. So that's one of the reasons you want to make sure that you get your pre-approval upfront so you know exactly exactly what you're shopping for and make sure. So when you meet with the mortgage broker, they are going to go through your finances, make sure that you've got your income handy. If you're self-employed, you're going to need to make sure that you've got your notice of assessments from the CRA so they can see how much income that you're declaring. But it's really important to have a good mortgage broker. The mortgage broker can shop around to all of the banks for you. And there's only, I know Bank of Montreal, for example, doesn't work with mortgage brokers, but all of the rest of the banks do. So that when you're working with a mortgage broker, they can shop around for you to get you the best rate so that you can negotiate the best rate. Or if you don't want to work with a mortgage broker and you've been working with a bank for a long time, then make sure that you negotiate hard on the rate. I find with most banks, they'll give you the first rate, but then if you ask again, hey, wait a minute, is this the best you can do? They will come down a little bit for you. So make sure that you negotiate with those banks for sure. And, when you're looking at spending money on a house, you have to look at whether you're going to use variable or a fixed rate of interest. Now, the market over the last few years, the interest rates have come down so much that even I, as a staunch variable rate person, I just recently renewed my mortgage for a cheap rate. So I thought, okay, I'm going to do a 3-year fixed because the rates were so low that I just kind of thought, why not? But I guess in other marketplaces, I certainly consider doing a variable rate over a fixed rate to make sure that you are paying yourself first. And those are some of my tips for first-time home buyers. I hope this has been informative. If you've got any questions, please reach out to me. I can be found at Davelle, that's Davelle, at bosleyrealestate.com. So please let me know what questions you might have, what you'd like me to cover in a future podcast. And thanks so much for listening to the Toronto Real Estate Market Insights from Davelle.
You've been listening to the Morrison Report. Hosted by Davelle Morrison, sales representative for Bosley Real Estate Limited Brokerage, real estate investor and best-selling author, bringing you insights on the Toronto real estate market. Join us for another podcast.